The first Roman type to be consciously designed was done so by Nicholas Jensen in Venice in 1470. And Jensen set out to create an even color in multiple lines of type and equally in spaces within and surrounding the letters as in the letter shapes. And so he wanted to have a typeface that would work really well with the printing press. And he accomplished that. And he was a type founder, and so from Venice, and he wanted to create these ideal individual letters. And this is really the first Roman type to be consciously designed with typographical criteria. The letters were designed to combine harmoniously on the page. If we look at the phone book, it presented sort of a typographic challenge. If you've ever seen a phone book, you'll notice that there's this really thin, delicate page, these thin, delicate pages that are used because you need so many pages for a phone book. And the problem with those thin, delicate pages is they're hard to print on. The print had to be really small, it had to stay legible, and ink tends to absorb and spread out. And so it was problematic. And so the font used was called Bell Gothic. And Bell Gothic was designed for maximum legibility in the adverse conditions of small print on poor quality newsprint paper, into which ink would tend to absorb and spread out. And so it's therefore a really popular font for printing at really small size. And it's a realistic sans serif or a realist sans serif font, and it was designed by Chauncey H. Griffith. It was then replaced by Matthew Carter in 1978. And the reason Matthew Carter created sort of a redesign of it was they needed to conserve even more space and put more characters per line. And so this is an example of Bell Centennial, which was Matthew Carter's interpretation of Bell Gothic. You also might see black letter every day if you read the New York Times. The New York Times logo nameplate was designed in black letter. And this was done because in 1851, when Henry Jarvis Raymond had to choose a nameplate for his new newspaper, the New York Daily Times, he wanted to model the Times as closely as possible on the London Times, which used Gothic type. Changes were made, a few changes were made, terminals were trimmed and edges were smooth, and it became a little bit thinner, a little bit more vertical. But 150 years ago, this was put in place and it's still there today. There's very few changes that have been made over the years. The New Yorker is set on a tight 3-column grid, and it's established by its first art editor 82 years ago. And this is another example. Animal Farm is just a great, beautiful example of typography creating visual hierarchy on a page. So there's, this strategy of putting this bigger text or bigger font right in the center of the page, and it sort of draws your eye in and makes you look. And so as we kind of learn more about typography, we'll start thinking more about visual hierarchy. The New York subway was a really, really chaotic system before it was strategically redesigned in 1965. The first signs in the New York subway were created by Hans and Lafarge, who are architects, and they sort of established a mosaic station and names on platform walls. And there were also these large illuminated porcelain enamel signs hung over the express platforms using hand lettering on a white background. And this is where the station names were painted, as well as sort of a variety of other porcelain enamel and hand-painted signs made by other companies. And over the years, many hand-painted signs were added to the subway system, and some of them you can still see. And so there became this really strategic approach to designing these spaces so that they would become a lot more easy for people to navigate. This is an example of signage in the Oceanic Building in Heathrow in 1961. And it's the Alphabet Airport, which was designed by Matthew Carter in 1960. And the subway in New York was designed strategically to create that order as well. So signage is a great place to look and observe and sort of admire typeface design. There's lots of hand-drawn signs out there, and they're often very unique and original and interesting. So I really encourage you, as you kind of start to really discover typography and think about typography deeply, to look at especially old signs for examples of different styles of fonts and lettering. This is a cab in Mumbai, India, and you can just see, how vibrant it is. And there's like lots of different styles going on here. There's sans serif font, and then on the license plate you have like a really intense, more modern serif font. In this map of Helsinki, you see also kind of a combination of different fonts sort of placed on a grid. It's very chaotic. And then, typography has evolved as technology has evolved. Now we're always thinking about screen design. And so there's specific typefaces that are designed specifically to be seen really legibly on a screen. This is the Valharding Cooperative Building, and it was vinyl type designed by Lust, and it's designed to facilitate nighttime advertising. So that was the specific problem that needed to be solved. Stamps always are a really kind of interesting design challenge because they're very small and very ornate, and there's often extensive sort of elaborate detail in these tiny little frames for a stamp. And you have to be able to read the text, and it also has to stylistically sort of fit in with the graphics. And a lot of people collect stamps because stamps can be quite beautiful, and there's just a tremendous amount of strategic design that occurs to make them legible and beautiful and communicating their unique messages. This is a United Nations poster, and you can see that there's different strategies in place here. There's this like really intense, bold, textured sans serif font sort of placed on top of this sort of hand-drawn type underneath. And you're not even reading the type underneath. You're sort of kind of going back and forth between the two really different visual styles here. So typography is the art and technique of printing with movable type. It's the composition of printed material for movable type, and it's the arrangement and appearance of printed matter. And if you ever get a chance, go to the Hamilton Wood Type and Printing Museum, because that's where you'll see so many examples of beautiful print, and all done on letterpress. And this is an example of a layout with a letterpress, and you can see like all of the different blocks of type sort of laid out here with the leading in place for the separation, and then you're going to create this beautiful poster with this layout. Some more samples. So type is a means to solve a design problem. And so when you become a typographer or if you're a designer, you're going to think about the problem first, and then you're going to really figure out which typeface or which font communicates the message and solves the problem. And there's 5 classic typefaces that we're going to be thinking really deeply about and analyzing. The first is Garamond, which is considered old style. The second is Baskerville, which is considered transitional. Then Bodoni, which is modern. There's Century, and there's Helvetica, which is sans serif. So we're going to be kind of looking at all of these and thinking about all of these in our lecture next week.